When you inherit an IRA or Roth IRA, even a 401k from someone that's not your spouse, what are the rules? What's required as far as drawing the money out? What are the rules? Those rules changed a couple of years ago, and now we've got a new acronym, we've got new rules that we need to follow. I'm going to explain that and more coming up. My name is Mike Bernard. I am the host of the Wise Money Show. I'm also one of the certified financial planners right here at Korhorn Financial Group. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and smash that thumbs up button. So you know what RMD stands for. It's required minimum distribution. When you turn age 72, unless they change it to 75, and they just changed it from 70 and a half, blah, it's now 72. For pre-tax retirement dollars that you have, not your Roth, but your pre-tax 401k or your IRA, if you've rolled it over, when you turn 72, you've got to take an RMD every single year, a required minimum distribution. You can take more than that, but a required amount, a minimum amount, is required for you to withdraw. And there's a calculation that your CFP will do for you every year. It's around 4% and it goes up, but that's not the purpose of this video. But when you're living, that's what you got to do from age 72 on, required minimum distribution. But what if you inherit someone's IRA or someone's Roth IRA? What are the rules with that? Well, if you are married to that person, then the rules are pretty easy. You have the choice to make that IRA or Roth IRA yours. If they're your spouse and you're the beneficiary, primary beneficiary, then you can actually just make that IRA or Roth IRA, you can make it your IRA or Roth IRA. Those weren't the rules when I got in the business 20 years ago, but those are the rules now. And that's really easy. You don't need to stretch it out. You don't need to, require distributions based off of that person's age and so on. No, it just can become yours. You can choose to not do that, but that's the subject of an entirely different video. There are very few planning instances where you might want to, but it's an option. But if you're a spouse, 99 times out of 100, likely, if your spouse passes away, you're going to turn their IRA into your IRA and just act like it's been yours all along. The purpose of today's video is, what if you inherit an IRA or a Roth IRA or a 401k from someone that's not your spouse? What are the rules then? Well, it used to be that you could stretch the IRA. Say that person passed away and you inherited the dollars at this point in time. Throughout the rest of your life expectancy, you could take out as much as you wanted, so you could take out the whole thing in that year, but you had to at least take out a minimum amount every single year. And there was a calculation done by your certified financial planners based on that person's life expectancy. It was confusing, but you could take out just a little bit every single year if you wanted to stretch that IRA, okay? And you could just take out a little bit and it would continue for a long, long, long time. Or you could just take out a whole bunch, or you could take out a little bit, and then a big chunk. And so you had lots of options, you had flexibility. Well, that stretch IRA went away with the Trump tax laws, the Secure Act, a couple of years ago. Now, instead of having the ability to stretch that distribution out and stretch that account out and take a required minimum distribution every single year, RMD, from an inherited account, now this arrow stops. Bam. You've got 10 years to withdraw that entire account. And we didn't even get into the old rules with the Roth IRA because it's not necessary anymore. Now it all lives by the 10-year rule. There's no more required minimum distribution every year when you inherit an account. It's now a recommended minimum distribution or suggested minimum distribution. They will come up with an acronym for this. The financial world always does. They just haven't yet, not one that's fully adopted. But technically the rule is you just have to withdraw the entire account within 10 years. That's it. That's it. You don't have to take a little bit out each and every year. You don't have to. That is no longer required. So there's no required minimum distribution. The requirement is the account balance is zero after 10 years. You draw it all out. So if you inherited an IRA or a Roth IRA from someone, you don't have to do anything. And there's no required minimum distribution. Your financial professional, your CFP might tell you, might suggest that you withdraw a little bit, or there might be a recommended minimum distribution so that you draw it out in 1/10 increments over the next 10 years, but you don't have to do anything. This is an enormous planning opportunity. You could make a huge mistake, or you could significantly enhance and improve your overall tax and financial situation. Let me explain. What if over these 10 years, you plan to retire in 7 years? And you've got high income, high income, high income, high income each of these years until you retire, and then your income stops. Well, if you inherited an IRA, this is wonderful with these new rules. You don't have to take anything until you want to, as long as it's before those 10 years. And if you retire after 7 years, then you can draw the entire amount out in those final 3 years. You could draw it all out in year 1 and pay all the tax at that point, or you could divide it by 3, or you could divide it and take nothing out, and draw it all out in that last year. You've got options. You've got flexibility in regards to the timing and the taxability of this money. So a lot of times, financial advisors like me, this new 10-year rule, we're looking at that and saying this is an enormous financial planning problem that you've got to identify and plan for your beneficiaries. Because if you're the saver and you've been saving and saving and saving and you've built up a lot of wealth into an IRA or pre-tax account, and then all of a sudden, if you pass away, you're going to have to lay that on your beneficiaries, and they're going to have to draw it all out in 10 years. You've spent your whole life delaying, avoiding the tax, and then all of a sudden, your heirs are going to inherit a huge tax problem. That is something you've got to work with your CFP on to plan for. But for the purpose of this video today, I wanted to talk about the fact that there is no required minimum distribution anymore. It's just required that the whole thing is cashed out within 10 years. That presents some financial planning opportunities, some tax planning opportunities. You've got to work with your CFP on that. So basically, here's your one last sort of reminder about this before I get to your action items. I mean, just know if you inherit an IRA, Roth IRA, 401k, and you don't have a CFP working with you and doing comprehensive financial planning, there's not going to be anyone out there telling you you're required to take this little bit every single year. They're not. I mean, they might give you a suggested minimum distribution or a recommended minimum distribution. They don't have to, though. And so you might just assume it's on autopilot and then all of a sudden show up at year 10 and get a notice saying you've got to take out $117,000 or whatever the number is, right? You've got to cash out this entire account, no issues, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You've got to cash it out and it's all taxable at that point. So there is no required minimum distribution anymore with an inherited IRA from a non-spouse. It's a recommended minimum distribution or a suggested minimum distribution. Now, what are your action items? Number 1, if you are saving up, and most people that are fans of this channel are saving up, they're accumulating dollars. So if you are saving up, you've got to talk to your certified financial planner on how do we plan for this rule changes for your beneficiaries. Is that something you should start planning for right now? What are the options, or are you delaying all of this tax potentially? Are you avoiding tax at the 22% or 24% tax bracket just to potentially have your your kids or heirs inherit these dollars and pay more tax on them. So work with your certified financial planner. What's our plan? What's our strategy for this? But the second is, if you potentially stand in line to inherit an IRA, a Roth IRA, a 401k from someone that's not your spouse, say that you've already lost one parent and you've got one parent still alive, but they're aged and they're older. This is where you got to start thinking about what's the appropriate way to plan for the required distribution. What tax bracket are they in? How much is in their IRA, their pre-tax account? What's your financial situation? And if something happens in the next few years, what do the following 10 years look like? And how could you strategize that? I mean, it sounds a little crude, but being proactive with this can help you avoid lots of money in taxes. So work with your CFP on that. If you don't have a CFP, you can contact one on my team. Find us online, corehorn.com or wisemoneyshow.com, or send us an email, info@corehorn.com. All right, there you have it. Go out and take your next wise step in your financial life.